Okay, so let's get right into it. We're going to talk about one of the scariest periods in Roman history. It's a 50-year window starting around 235 AD that historians call the crisis of the 3rd century.
And Crisis almost doesn't cover it.
Right.
I mean, imagine the world's only superpower just completely melting down,
Yeah.
all at once.
You've got political collapse, the economy imploding, constant invasions, and then on top of everything, a massive plague.
It's really the moment where the old Roman Empire, the one everyone thinks of, starts to die, and something new begins to take its place. It's that transition point toward what we'd eventually call the Middle Ages.
So what kicks it all off? I mean, Rome was famous for its stability for centuries. How does it all fall apart so
It
fast?
really all comes back to one thing, a total failure of leadership. This is the era of the so-called barracks emperors.
And what does that mean exactly? A barracks emperor.
It's pretty much what it sounds like. These weren't emperors chosen by the Senate or who inherited the throne. They were generals and their own armies. The legions and the barracks just decided, you're the emperor now,
So power was just taken by whoever had the biggest army?
by whoever had the most swords, yeah. And the problem is there was always another general who thought he should be in charge.
Which leads to this insane statistic. In about 50 years, there was something like 25 official emperors.
And that's not even counting the dozens of others who tried and failed.
So their average reign was, what, less than 2 years?
Barely. And most of them didn't retire. They were assassinated.
By their own troops a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm. The same soldiers who put them in power would just switch their loyalty to a new guy who promised them a bigger payday. It was an endless, destructive cycle of civil war.
And if you're a regular person, a farmer or a shopkeeper, how can you live your life? There's no stability. The government is focused on fighting itself, not defending the borders.
Exactly. And that internal fighting was like a giant, we're open for attack sign hanging over the empire.
And Rome's enemies definitely notice.
Well, they notice immediately. In the West, you have groups like the Goths and the Alemanni. They start pouring across the borders.
And these weren't huge invasions at first, right? More like raids.
Right, but constant, devastating raids. They'd hit farms, burn villages, and then retreat before the slow Roman legions could even respond. The border garrisons were all off fighting in some civil war.
And in the East, it was an even bigger problem.
Much bigger. You have the rise of a new, very powerful Sassanid Persian Empire. And they weren't just raiding. They were an organized state with a powerful army. And they started capturing entire Roman cities and provinces.
So the empire is literally being attacked on two fronts, thousands of miles apart.
And it just couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
The military was stretched too thin. They'd pull legions from the German frontier to fight the Persians, which, just left Germany wide open.
It was an impossible situation. And this weakness at the center is what leads to the empire itself breaking apart.
Yeah, the provinces basically decided they were on their own. The emperor in Rome was too busy or too far away to help them, so they said, fine, we'll protect ourselves.
And that's when you get the empire splitting into three.
3 separate empires.
Mm.
In the West, you get the Gallic Empire, which was basically Britain, Spain, and France.
And in the East, the Palmyrene Empire, centered on the super wealthy city of Palmyra in Syria.
So now you have 3 Roman governments, all with their own armies, all fighting each other. It's a perfect illustration of how the whole system had failed.
Okay, so this political and military chaos, it must have just destroyed the economy.
It detonated. I mean, all those civil wars and armies, they cost a staggering amount of money. The soldiers constantly demanded raises and bonuses to stay loyal.
And the emperors didn't have the money, so what did they do?
They started cheating. The technical term is debasement.
Let's break that down. A Roman silver coin, a denarius, was valuable because it was actually made of silver, right?
Right. In the good old days, it was maybe 80–90% pure silver. But during the crisis, the emperors started melting the coins down and mixing in cheap metals like copper.
But they still look the same.
Well, they give them a thin silver wash, but underneath they are mostly junk. By the height of the crisis, some coins had less than 5% silver in them.
Wow. So how did they get people to accept them?
They couldn't. That's the thing. People aren't stupid. They knew the money was worthless, and that led to one thing: massive runaway inflation.
So prices for everything just skyrocketed.
Through the roof. Your life savings could become worthless in a matter of months. People just stopped using coins altogether.
So what did they do? Go back to trading?
They went back to bartering, trading goods directly. A bag of wheat for a pair of shoes. The government even had to start collecting taxes in goods: grain, leather, oil, because its own money was useless. It was a huge step backward.
So you have civil war, invasions, economic collapse, and then it gets even worse.
Then the plague hits, the Cyprian plague.
Which scientists now think was probably something like smallpox or a viral hemorrhagic fever.
Whatever it was devastating. It swept across the whole empire and lasted for years. We have sources that say thousands were dying every single day in big cities like Rome and Alexandria.
And that loss of life wasn't just a tragedy, it had huge practical effects.
A massive impact. Suddenly you have a huge labor shortage. There aren't enough farmers to grow food, which makes the families even worse.
And fewer men for the army.
Exactly. Just when you need soldiers more than ever, a huge portion of your recruiting pool is gone. It just added this layer of complete despair to everything else.
And even before the plague, farming was in trouble. Armies marching back and forth across the countryside.
They destroy everything. They trample crops, take livestock. The military, which was supposed to be the protector, became just another predator.
So farmers would just abandon their land?
They'd flee the invaders or get forced into the army. Either way, food production just plummeted, which meant more famine, more desperation.
All this fear of invaders, of starvation, it physically changed what the empire looked like, didn't it?
It absolutely did. The classic Roman city was open, confident, but now security was everything.
So they started building walls.
Huge walls.
Yeah.
All over the empire, cities that hadn't needed defenses for centuries were suddenly throwing up massive stone fortifications.
The best example is in Rome itself. The famous Aurelian walls were built during this exact period.
Yeah, the capital of the world suddenly needed walls to protect itself from raids. That tells you everything you need to know.
Life in the cities got more cramped, more fearful, and the rich, they just left.
Many did. They moved to their country estates and built their own fortified villas, basically private fortresses. They couldn't rely on the state for protection anymore.
The army had to change too. The old, slow Roman infantry wasn't working against these fast-moving raiders.
Not at all. They were too slow. So the military started to rely much more on cavalry, on horsemen who could respond quickly.
And they created new mobile reserve units, right?
Yes, the comitatenses. Elite units kept back from the frontier, ready to race to any hotspot. It was a totally new way of thinking about defense.
And where did they get the new soldiers?
Well, that's maybe the biggest change of all. There weren't enough Romans left, so they started recruiting from the barbarian tribes they were fighting.
These were the foederates.
Exactly. They'd give a tribe land inside the empire in exchange for military service. So you'd have Goths in the Roman army fighting other Goths.
Which worked, I guess, in the short term.
It did. But in the long run, it meant the army became less and less Roman. The culture changed, loyalty became complicated. It was a sign of things to come.
So after 50 years of this nightmare, how did the empire even survive? How did it pull back from the brink?
It really came down to a couple of incredibly tough, incredibly effective emperors. The first was Aurelian.
Restorer of the world, that was the title.
And he earned it. In just 5 years, he was a whirlwind. He defeated the breakaway Gallic Empire in the west, and then he marched east and crushed the Palmyrene Empire.
He literally stitched the empire back together by force.
He did. He also built the walls around Rome and tried to reform the currency.
Hmm.
But the tragic irony is that after all that, he was assassinated by his own officials.
So the old sickness was still there.
It was. The real end of the crisis comes with the next major figure, Diocletian, in 284 AD.
And his genius was more about organization than just winning battles.
Absolutely. He looked at the empire and said, "This is too big for one man to rule." It was the core problem.
So he decides to share power.
He creates the tetrarchy, the rule of 4. He appointed a co-emperor, and then they each appointed a junior emperor.
So you had 4 rulers, each responsible for a different part of the empire.
Precisely. It meant there was always an emperor near a crisis zone. Decisions could be made faster. The whole system was more responsive.
And he also moved the centers of power away from Rome itself.
Right, because Rome was far from the dangerous borders. He set up capitals in places like Milan and Nicomedia, closer to the action. His reforms finally brought stability. They stopped the endless cycle of civil war.
But even though Rome survived, it was never really the same, was it?
Not at all. It was permanently changed. After all this chaos, the emperor's power became totally absolute. It was much more of military dictatorship.
And you see other big changes.
Huge ones. In all this chaos and suffering, Christianity starts to spread incredibly fast. It gave people a sense of hope that the old world couldn't.
And the economy.
Yeah,
The middle class was basically wiped out by the inflation, right?
pretty much. The gap between the super rich landowners and the very poor grew enormous. The empire survived for another couple of centuries, sure, but it was a darker, more brittle, and more divided world.
So the crisis really shows how even the greatest superpower can be brought to its knees, not necessarily by outside enemies.
But by its own internal divisions,
Yeah.
by political failure and economic collapse. That's the real threat.
A powerful lesson. Good luck with your studies.